Politics in Star Wars doesn't make any sense. Now before you say, duh, they're just fantasy movies, at least 3 of them devote a good portion of screen time to politics. But even without those, it's important to know who is fighting who in general, why they're fighting, who's stronger than who, the basic stuff. Even when Star Wars does do this, something feels off. If the movies spent a little more time behind the scenes thinking through the setting, what's on screen would be a lot better even from a storytelling perspective. I want to focus on this as not necessarily pointing out flaws, but pointing out missed opportunities. So what are those opportunities? This is What, Why, How, and that's what the video is about. If you like this sort of thing, don't forget to subscribe. This video is going to focus on the prequels, but if you'd like to read my idea for some rewrites, you can do so on patreon.com/whatwhyhow. And why not subscribe so you can be alerted when my video on the sequels comes out. Okay, let's look at the prequels, which are the most focused on politics out of all the Star Wars movies.
And action!
Right off the bat with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, we're dealing with the taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems. The galaxy-wide Republic is endlessly debating the issue, while the greedy Trade Federation has just gone ahead and taken matters into its own hands, imposing a blockade on the small planet of Naboo. Now, it's not really clear how blockading Naboo will resolve a debate over taxes. There's like 3 possible explanations that are sort of contradictory. In the end, it's all part of a scheme, though, by this guy, Darth Sidious,
stunted slime,
who is secretly Senator Palpatine of Naboo. So maybe there's like a plot to garner sympathy for himself. The idea of a trade federation being able to impose a blockade on some random planet is great to me. The idea of the Galactic Republic being unable to actually govern the galaxy makes perfect sense. But I would go a step further. The Galactic Republic could not exist at all in the circumstances presented in The Phantom Menace. I know the prequels are about how the Republic falls apart. I know the Hutts and evidently the Trade Federation already control huge swaths of territory. But how does the Republic even exist in the first place? The Republic has no standing military. It should have collapsed 500 years ago. I'm not an expert on the lore, but apparently the Republic has just relied for 1,000 years on 3 things. 1 is a small militia provided by member planets in times of emergency. 2 is the small judicial forces. Those are the guys in the red ship that get blown up at the start of the movie.
Captain, look!
And 3 is the Jedi, who have kept peace in the galaxy for 1,000 years. So what's the issue? Well, the galaxy in Star Wars is literally a galaxy. It's 120,000 light years across. It has 400 billion stars and a population of over 100 quadrillion, split between 1 billion planets and millions upon millions of intelligent species. Let's put this in proportion. Even if only 1/3 of sentient beings in the galaxy live in the Republic, that's 30 quadrillion people across maybe 300 million planets. In the United States, we have a population of 330 million, and with that, 140,000 full-time federal law enforcement officers, or about 1 for every 2,000 people. That's not counting state police, and that's not counting the US military. If the Republic were like the United States, it would have 15 million federal law enforcement officers. Just kidding, billion. Just kidding, 15 trillion federal law enforcement officers. That is trillion with a T. I understand the Republic is supposed to be decentralized, so how about a federal police force 1,000th the ratio of America's? That would be 15 billion. What about 1,000th of that? That would be 15 million. The judicial forces are so small and insignificant that they completely disappear from the movies. For all we know, there were 2 of them and they both got blown up by the Trade Federation. Meanwhile, there are apparently 10,000 Jedi. Even that number seems way too large from what we see in the movies, which has fewer than 100 Jedi on screen ever, but you know what, let's go with 10,000. That is literally microscopic compared to the 100 quadrillion people in the galaxy. To put this in perspective, there could be another 10,000 Jedi orders across the galaxy, the same size as the one we see in the movie. That would be 9,999 more Jedi orders, and it would only amount to 100 million total people, or 1/3 of the size of the United States, across the entire galaxy. We only see the Jedi and the Sith in the movies. Why wouldn't other Force-sensitive people organize themselves? Who would stop them? Why aren't they there? Now maybe only a tiny percentage of people can move bricks with their mind. If only 1/100th of 1% of people were sensitive to the Force, that would be 10 trillion people. It just doesn't make sense. The Jedi could literally look around a single apartment building in Coruscant and quadruple their numbers. There should be millions, if not billions of people arriving on their doorstep to volunteer. Now I understand they're supposed to be decadent and stagnant, but you can have that and also explore additional interesting routes of storytelling by making the Jedi larger. Wouldn't it be more interesting if they didn't just have a temple on Coruscant, but a whole decadent, corrupt planet? Or wouldn't it be interesting if there were more temples elsewhere in the galaxy? Maybe the villains could corrupt one of those temples and have an army of Sith. That sounds like an interesting idea, George Lucas. You can have a spooky, evil temple. You can have a battle between multiple Jedi and Sith. A single medium-sized planet could have raised a military force greater than all the Jedi and wiped them out in one swoop. The whole crisis in Episode 1 over the planet of Naboo should be happening literally thousands of times every day across the galaxy. There's not just a limited number of Jedi like Episode 2 says, there's basically none. They're irrelevant, or at least they should be. Now maybe each major planet controls its own sector using its own military force. First of all, why didn't they secede 1,000 years ago, the first time the Senate voted against their interests? There's nothing stopping them. Second, even if for some magical reason they haven't seceded, surely we would see these fearsome planetary navies later on in the prequels. Nope, there is no evidence of any of this. And again, you can say the fact that the Republic has such a small military force is why these movies happen. I'm not saying a war shouldn't happen, I'm saying a civil war should have happened 1,000 years ago. These movies obviously take place in a world where things have happened in the past, but the Republic couldn't even exist on screen in the first place. Forget about the Republic not being able to enforce laws on Tatooine, that makes sense. How does it enforce laws anywhere in the entire galaxy? Nobody should know what the Republic even is because it is so irrelevant. It's about like the equivalent power-wise of a random NGO of like 10 people in the real world. Think about it. For the Galactic Republic to exist, it must rely on taxes raised by the central government from the planets to pay for anything: government buildings, federal judges to arbitrate disputes between planets, printing and managing currency, basic bare-bones government functions. Who would pay those taxes? How could the Republic enforce any federal law? It would need some leverage to prevent entire sectors of the galaxy from fighting other sectors without even paying attention to Coruscant and the Senate. If the Republic has no way to enforce its will, then its member planets presumably find some benefit in remaining part of the Republic, but I cannot imagine a single benefit anybody gets from staying in this thing. Also, the Senate of the Republic is too small. We can see the Senate chambers in the movie. There are less than 1,000 Senate pods on the screen, each with at least one senator. Let's be generous and say there are 10,000 senators. If we give a low estimate of 300 million worlds belonging to the Republic, that means 1 out of every 30,000 inhabited planets gets representation in the Senate. Now I can understand the sparse and tiny planets not getting their own senator, even if small Naboo does, but how does it make sense for there to be 30,000 unrepresented planets for every planet with representation? Surely out of 300 million planets, more than 10,000 have a large population? Wouldn't it be interesting to make the Senate larger? There's not a real limit here, it's a CGI set, just make it bigger, just extrude the Senate seats up. Maybe the fact that the Senate is so large could be why there is so much bureaucracy and proceduralism. That could be something interesting to explore, but they don't really do that. On the other hand, if you keep the Senate small, maybe that's because the number of senators per planet has been frozen for 1,000 years because the Republic is so stagnant. That could be one of the complaints people have throughout the galaxy about the Republic. That could be one of the things that animate the separatist movement that we see in Episode 2. This sort of thing, the issue with representation versus real life, was a problem in England in the past. It was for villages though, not planets. Anyways, we've gotten off track. The Trade Federation invades Naboo. The Senate is powerless to stop them, but the Naboo managed to fend them off. The whole crisis of the Phantom Menace is masterminded, of course, by Senator Palpatine of Naboo to garner sympathy for himself, probably, and make Chancellor Valorum look incompetent, so that he could then take his job. But of course Valorum looks incompetent because the Galactic Republic could barely even govern the modern-day country of India, let alone Coruscant, let alone the galaxy. Okay, let's skip ahead to the Attack of the Clones. This movie starts 10 years after the end of the Phantom Menace and at the beginning of a larger civil war across the galaxy. Now, in a draft of the script I found online, George Lucas wrote, "Several hundred solar systems have declared their intentions to secede from the Republic." But looks like somebody smartly edited that to several thousand for the movie. That's a bit better because, again, there's like millions of solar systems in the Republic. But you know what? I think it would be more realistic if 1 million or so were preparing to secede, but I don't think audiences would understand that, so whatever, it's fine. But I also wish we got an explanation in the movie for why exactly those planets were deciding to secede. Since the first movie isn't really a good setup for the whole crisis, everything gets squished together in episode 2 and 3. But you know what, I guess the Republic should have so many problems that each planet can have a dozen reasons to secede. Anyways, the plot of episode 2 begins with someone trying to blow up Senator Padme Amidala, who is opposed to building any sort of army to fight rebels, since she thinks it will trigger a civil war. That's a bit silly, but whatever, maybe that's her character. A few minutes later, Amidala blames the Separatists for trying to blow her up, even though right after the attempt on her life, she was supposed to give a big speech saying war would only start if the Republic built an army. So which is it? Does she think they can make peace with the Separatists, or does she think the Separatists have begun blowing up senators? I know she's supposed to be in her early 20s, but she's not an idiot. Wouldn't the most obvious conclusion be that somebody who wants to build the army tried to blow her up as the strongest voice against building an army? It doesn't even have to be Palpatine who's pretending to be neutral. I would be most suspicious of any sort of defense contractor or weapons manufacturer in the Republic. Why not blame them for trying to blow up the pacifists? The Separatists are, rationally speaking, the least likely suspects. Anyways, they assign Anakin and Obi-Wan to protect Padme. They interrupt a death by slugs attempt, capture the assassin, only for another assassin to kill that first assassin. I'm not going to talk about all the weird stuff with this scene, like how if they truly wanted to get Padme, they could have just used that poison dart in the first place through her window, but anyways. Next, Obi-Wan and Anakin split up, with Obi-Wan tracking down the assassin, and Anakin and Padme going on a romantic getaway vacation. Obi-Wan traces the dart to Kamino, where he discovers aliens are building a clone army. Now, when I was a kid, I was kind of confused by all this. I thought the clone army was being made for the bad guys, but Obi-Wan was going to steal them for the good guys, or something like that. But nope, apparently Kamino is building a gigantic clone army for the Senate, as requested almost 10 years ago by some Jedi named Sifo Dyas, who's been dead for a while. Except nobody knows what they're talking about, because neither the Senate nor the Jedi Order authorized him to order the creation of a giant clone army. So apparently nobody has checked in with Kamino for like yet they're still making an army, presumably spending billions upon billions of bucks to do this. Did they need a down payment? What about installments? Surely Sifo Dyas alone didn't have enough cash in his wallet to purchase a gigantic clone army. Just what kind of business are these guys on Kamino running where they can grow an entire army based on one guy's word? In the movies, we never get an answer to what Sifo Dyas was actually up to. I think I assumed it was Palpatine or Count Dooku, the bad guy, pretending to be a Jedi, but apparently in the cartoon Clone Wars show, Sifo Dyas actually ordered the clone army on purpose to fight the bad guys, which just raises more questions. Anyways, apparently the assassin Jango Fett is the source code for the clones and just hangs out on Kamino. Shouldn't this make Obi-Wan suspicious that the Kamino guys ordered the assassination of Padme? They literally work together. They're making an army, and she wants to stop the Republic from paying for that army. Later, Obi-Wan says, "There appears to be no motive for Kamino trying to blow up Padme." Really? There's no motive? Really? Anyways, Jango says that he wasn't actually recruited by Sifo Dyas for the clones, but instead,
I was recruited by a man called Tyrannus on one of the moons of Bogdan.
Tyrannus. Obi-Wan, I think this clone army is bad news. Actually, the script has Jango Fett say Darth Tyrannus, but they cut the Darth out of the movie to make it less obvious that this guy's bad. Except later on, presumably, the Jedi learn that Darth Tyrannus is actually Count Dooku, the leader of the Separatists. Yoda and the Jedi just shrug away any concern that their clone army was built by the bad guys, and just go along with a conspiracy because the script says they do. Can't the Jedi just cancel the order for the clone troopers? Can't every loyalist planet raise 1,000 soldiers instead? They would then have more soldiers to fight the bad guys if they did that. I know you're probably tired of me talking about scale, but apparently Kamino has built 200,000 units with another million on the way. Judging from lore and the TV shows and books, a unit actually just means one clone trooper. That's what the canon is. But 1 million men can't even conquer a few thousand planets, let alone wage a galactic civil war. Let's put this in perspective. Over the course of World War II, the US didn't just have 1 million soldiers, more than 16 million people, that's 16, served in the US Armed Forces. Per the 1940 census, the US back then had a population of 132 million, so that's about 12% of the total population serving in World War II. Let's say the Republic doesn't rule 100 quadrillion people, but 30 quadrillion. A tenth of 30 quadrillion is 3 quadrillion people. That's a lot more than 1.2 million clone troopers. Actually, let's just focus on the trillions of people who apparently live on Coruscant, the capital of the Republic. We'll even say that there's 1 trillion, even though it should be more based on the fact the entire surface is covered with skyscrapers. If they gave 1 out of every million people in a fraction of Coruscant a gun, it would be the same size as the clone army. Now I can understand war in Star Wars deprioritizing foot soldiers. That makes sense. The most important combat should be taking place in space because you can just bombard a planet to lava from orbit. But that introduces a whole new issue. While the Trade Federation and its allies have been building a space fleet, which we see in the first movie, where's the Republic's fleet? They don't have any. We'll get to that problem in a second. But back on Coruscant, Palpatine tricks Representative Jar Jar Binks into proposing Palpatine get emergency powers. In the original script, Palpatine describes these emergency powers as akin to a dictatorship. The Senate votes for this, and now apparently he can just go ahead and unilaterally raise armies. I get it's not that type of movie, but would a majority of the Senate really be so scared of just a few thousand separatists that they give this Palpatine guy such immense powers, seemingly without any real debate? Maybe Palpatine has spent the last 10 years brainwashing all 10,000 senators. It just feels like the timeline for Palpatine's ascent to power is too quick. If I was the leader of a planet debating whether or not to join the separatists, and the Republic votes to give some guy undemocratic powers, I'd probably side with the separatists. But we don't really see any real backlash on screen. I just want to underline these as missed opportunities to tell a better story. Anyways, Obi-Wan and Jango Fett fight, but Obi-Wan tracks him to Geonosis, where he sees factories building battle droids. He spies on a motley crew of alien CEOs joining Count Dooku, the leader of the Separatists. To be honest, it is very confusing who specifically this army is for, who exactly is building it, and who has or has not fully rebelled yet. Newt Gunray, the leader of the Trade Federation, says,
"I am not signing your treaty until I have her head on my desk."
Which, besides being a disappointing answer to the whole who hired Jango Fett to blow up Padme plot, also suggests the Trade Federation hasn't exactly joined the rebellion yet. But then 47 seconds later, Count Dooku says,
"Our friends from the Trade Federation have pledged their support."
So I guess there's not actually any issue there. Anyways, the Geonosians capture Obi-Wan, then also Anakin and Padme when they come to rescue him. The Jedi send a team to help, but they're surrounded, but Yoda arrives with a clone army and rescues everyone. Quick question, how did they get there? Who built those ships? It would be nice to get an explanation in the movies because the actual clone army is so important, but the answer is only in the extended lore. In case you were interested, there was apparently a whole secret conspiracy where Kamino paid a corporation to build this fleet on the planet Rothana. But again, I have no idea why they would build it without a down payment on a galactic scale. Surely it costs lots of money to build all those ships. George Lucas wanted a surprise rescue, but it comes with a lot of confusion. In any case, the new clone army and the separatist droid army fight on Geonosis. This issue has been pointed out a million times elsewhere, but it is a bit silly that armies in Star Wars just march against each other and shoot rather than nuke each other from orbit, which they have the capacity to do. In any case, the Republic wins the Battle of Geonosis, and Yoda says, "Begun the Clone Wars have." Since I haven't watched the cartoon show, I'm just going to skip ahead to episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Right away, the episode opens with a great and exciting space battle. But if you think about it for just a moment, it doesn't really make much sense. The space battle is above Coruscant, the capital of the Republic. So, is the Republic losing? It sure seems like it. The opening crawl says the Republic is crumbling under attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord Count Dooku. In a stunning move, the fiendish droid leader General Grievous has swept into the Republic capital and kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine. Gosh, if only the Republic built a larger army using its millions of planets, maybe this wouldn't happen. Anyways, Obi-Wan and Anakin get on the Separatist command ship, decapitate Count Dooku, rescue Palpatine, and crash land the ship on the surface. I have a few notes, but the biggest one is, what happened to all the other destroyed ships? Star Wars doesn't really have, real-world physics, but surely some of the debris in orbit would crash down on the surface, right? Billions of lives are in danger in Coruscant, but down on the surface everything seems okay. I don't like nitpicks for nitpick's sake. This is more of a missed opportunity to do some visual storytelling and depict the toll of the war, something Palpatine could take advantage of. Again, it's a missed opportunity. Despite the fact the Separatists were able to assault the capital of the Republic, the whole balance of power in the war seems completely unimportant and kind of vague. It is impossible to tell who is winning. Maybe it's a tie. In any case, Palpatine's next step in his scheme for unlimited power is to solidify his control over the Jedi Council, which he says is actually the one pushing for more control. The Senate passes the bill, and Palpatine appoints Anakin as his representative on the council. This of course stirs the pot. The Jedi Council, which apparently still has authority to decide military deployments, even though the clone army should be commanded by Palpatine instead, asks Anakin to spy on Palpatine too. I think the idea of a feud between the Chancellor and the Jedi makes perfect sense for the setting and for the scenario. I just wish we understood why the Chancellor being given the power to oversee the Jedi is so ludicrous when I thought they already had the power. It seems the Jedi answer to the Chancellor sometimes, but other times don't, and it changes depending on what the script needs. Like in Episode 1, it's Chancellor Valorum who sends Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to meet the Trade Federation, so why can't Palpatine just do that now? Anyways, the Jedi remember at the end of this meeting that the Wookiees need help.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Which just confuses the whole military chain of command, but whatever. Yoda gets busy on Kashyyyk. Chancellor Palpatine has Anakin report to the council that Grievous is hiding on Utapau, and that Palpatine wants Anakin to go after him. This creates a conflict since the council rejects Anakin and chooses Obi-Wan instead. But again, why does Palpatine need to ask the council for permission? Doesn't he have emergency powers? Isn't he the commander-in-chief? Can't he just order Anakin to do it? Now obviously his scheme is to divide Anakin from the Jedi.
This is outrageous.
But why isn't everyone confused by Palpatine suddenly asking the Jedi for permission to do things? Who is in charge of the war? I am confused. Here's another thing. Why is Grievous hiding? I understand the Separatists must have lost ships over Coruscant, but did they really lose the battle so bad that the new leader of the Separatists has to go into hiding? There are a bunch of possible explanations, but the movie provides none. This is another missed opportunity to get a sense of the progression of the war that's supposed to be central to these movies. I mean, the whole trilogy is supposed to have the backdrop of the Clone Wars, but the Clone Wars has so few battles on screen. It's a great idea to tell the story of a republic torn apart by war, but we don't see the impact of war, and the war seems kind of insignificant because of it. It's just CGI battles between anonymous background Jedi, clones, and robots. I understand the Clone Wars TV show humanizes the clones a bit more, but wouldn't it be more interesting to have some regular people fight in this war too, and not just on the spin-off shows but the silver screen? When real people get injured or die, it is much more emotionally impactful. They don't even have to make up the majority of these armies, just put some normal people on either side. Surely some normal people would want to join up to fight for the Republic or the Separatists out of all the millions of star systems each faction controls. It doesn't make sense for neither side of the war to take advantage of that source of labor. Anyways, Obi-Wan hunts down Grievous.
Hello there.
And Anakin just kind of like lurks around Coruscant for a while, doing nothing. In a deleted scene, Senator Bail Organa tells the audience that Palpatine has now appointed governors to oversee all star systems in the Republic too. I can understand Palpatine puppeteering the Senate on Coruscant, but surely some of the millions of planets the Republic controls would resent being told what to do by a governor appointed by some weirdo on Coruscant. Maybe those planets care enough to join the Separatists? The Separatists started off as just a few thousand planets. The Republic army is relatively tiny and just had to scramble to protect Coruscant. Surely the Separatists could benefit from Palpatine seizing more power, but there's no real backlash to Palpatine outside the main characters. In any case, Obi-Wan fights Grievous, so the Jedi clumsily scheme how they need to topple Palpatine, and maybe even the Senate too, if Palpatine doesn't give up his emergency powers soon. They should probably be a bit more careful. They're in like this big open room, and 3 of them are holograms. There's people in the background. Gosh, I wonder if it's in Palpatine's nature to monitor Jedi communications. This is another example of a missed opportunity. In the movie All the President's Men, the characters go through great lengths to make sure the Nixon administration isn't intercepting their communications. They put on music, they meet in a parking garage after wandering through the city. It really heightens the stress, the sense of danger. In this movie, the Jedi don't even check to make sure the room is clear before plotting a literal coup against the government. Next, Palpatine reveals to Anakin that he's a Sith Lord, just as Obi-Wan defeats Grievous. The Jedi decide to confront Palpatine to make sure he abandons his emergency powers, and Anakin tells the Jedi just beforehand that Palpatine is a Sith Lord.
A Sith Lord? We must move quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive.
Mace Windu and just 3 other Jedi confront Palpatine and attempt to place him under arrest. Palpatine somehow kills the other Jedi, but Windu beats him and then decides to just murder him all of a sudden, which Anakin stops, to put it lightly. Palpatine inducts Anakin as
Darth Vader
and says the Jedi are probably going to kill them both, along with all the senators. This isn't too far from the truth, it seems, because they were kind of planning to do that. I guess he didn't really need to, but wouldn't it be interesting if Palpatine literally showed Anakin the recording of the Jedi saying that at some point during all of this? That would be kind of interesting, right? Anyways, Palpatine says that they must wipe out the Jedi immediately, otherwise there will be civil war without end. So he sends Anakin to the Jedi Temple with a crew of clones, where he wipes out all the Jedi, including the younglings. Palpatine issues Executive Order 66, and the clones turn on the Jedi. In one swoop, most of the Jedi are wiped out, with only a few escaping. It seems the Chancellor is also about to target opposition senators, which also makes perfect sense, but actually he doesn't, because they kind of just linger around through this movie and into the next Star Wars stuff too for like 10 years. Next, Anakin goes to Mustafar and wipes out the Separatist leaders, and Palpatine uses the excuse of the Jedi coup to launch the first Galactic Empire. Now, instinctually, my first reaction to this would be doubt that after 1,000 generations of Republican rule, anybody in the galaxy would accept an absolute monarchy. But apparently it seems a whole bunch of worlds already do have monarchs, and Palpatine himself is from a noble family on Naboo, so whatever, it's alright. By the end of the movie, Obi-Wan confronts Anakin and mutilates him. Yoda confronts Sidious but loses, and the movie ends in a neat bow, setting up the original trilogy. So those are my thoughts about the prequels, a bunch of missed opportunities. That doesn't mean they're bad movies. There's some other reasons why they're not so good. If you want to support this channel, you can do so on patreon.com/whatwhyhow to get early access to future videos, including my thoughts on rewriting this. Thanks for those who already do, and why not subscribe as well, so you definitely see my next video, which might be about the sequels if this one does well. So like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you very much, and adios.